You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on AngryMarks.com with Peter H. and Stevie J. Find them on Twitter at HardcoreCDN and at AngryMarks. And now, for all the news, reviews, and interviews in mixed martial arts, it's time for Glove Up or Shut Up from AngryMarks.com.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up, right here at AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Finishing third in the Wrestling Observer 2017 predictions poll with a perfect record at UFC 219 of 5-0. Give it up for the one and only Stevie J.
One pick below Mr. Meltzer for the year.
Yes, I finished right below him, and that means I finished above filthy Tom Lawler.
Next time you see him face-to-face, tell him that.
Well, the next time I see him, there won't be Observer picks anymore because Josh Nason is doing away with them.
That's too bad.
But there is an upside to the story. Paul Fontaine is going to continue them on his own website.
Yes, and we'll definitely be plugging that website in the future once the 2018 schedule is among us. But Stevie, we've got the final show of UFC for 2017 to discuss. We're going to touch on some news from Ryzen Fighting Federation and, I don't know, we could talk about some other news as well. But Stevie, what do you want to say about this main event?
You know what? You and I had this debate, and you said, what if it goes 10 seconds? Are you going to feel stupid for paying for this pay-per-view? And my response back to you was, what if it goes 5 rounds? Then I can say it was the longest fight in Cyborg's career, and I saw history. So, guess what? My prediction came true, not yours.
No, but you're right, except I didn't think the judges were watching the right fight.
Well, two of the 3 judges clearly weren't, because I don't believe that Holly Holm won that many rounds. 49-46, I can see. I might give Holm 1 out of 5 rounds. I'm not giving her 2 out of 5.
I mean, you could give her the second.
Maybe. That's
the
generous.
Only one. Yeah,
that's being a little generous if you even give it to her, but you might. But you know what? The thing that Holly Holm did that I think some judges misunderstood as winning the fight was she would clinch with Cyborg and rush her into the fence. And that might have looked offensive, but she wasn't actually doing anything once she got Cyborg on the fence. And the minute Cyborg got free, she'd start popping her again.
So it's lean and pray as opposed to lay and pray. And the last time I checked, this is the metric of what they used to call octagon control isn't even a metric anymore.
Well, under the new scoring rules, it's not supposed to be.
Supposed to be. That should be the better qualifier.
Although they did say that Nevada had not adopted the new unified rules for mixed martial arts. So, yeah, I don't even know if that includes the new scoring system. But apparently it did when it came to scoring Khabib and Edson, because there were a lot of 10-8s handed out there. I know we'll get to that in a minute, but I just want to say, as far as Cyborg and Holm goes, I will give Holly Holm credit for a few things. She did match Cyborg pound for pound and size for size, which very few of Cyborg's opponents ever do. In terms of her footwork, she was sticking and moving, weaving, jabbing. She was game. She went out there for the full 5 rounds, lasted the full 5 rounds, took Cyborg someplace Cyborg has never been before, and even though I wouldn't call Holly Holm close to winning the fight, I guess you could say it was a moral victory, just showing that she was at Cyborg's level, because very few people in Cyborg's career have ever been on her level.
When you fight Cyborg, yes, she weighs in under the weight limit, but you know that she's putting on 5 or 10 pounds more before that.
Probably 20 if we're being honest about it. And that's the thing when I say Holly Holm matched her size for size. Holm was as big as her and didn't look like she shrunk down. She looked like she bulked up past the featherweight limit, cut the weight, and then was the same size as Cyborg. She looked maybe not as ripped as Cyborg does, because it's hard to get as ripped as Cyborg does, but she looked every bit physically the same in terms of muscular bulk. Not like huge bulging, but just size.
So, I mean, it's a weight class made for Cyborg that she can make weight. But, I mean, she's cutting and she's putting on weight. She won't be fighting long. I don't think, 145, it's going to be a division that I don't think we're going to see it past a few years.
Yeah, they've kind of got a problem with the fact that Bellator took all the other available 145-pounders out there that are any good.
Even if it was converted to a 155 weight class.
That would be even worse. You'd have even fewer at 155.
Like, who does Cyborg fight now?
Well, I believe they said Megan Anderson would be next.
Okay, so Megan... Let me go another way. On your rankings, is there a ranking for this?
No, you can't rank featherweights because they don't have enough to rank.
Put a top 5.
No. Unless there are 15 people in the division, you can't rank the division. That's how it works.
Well, just redo it to 155, do an open casting call, do a tough season, and rename it the Cyborg 155 Invitational.
Okay, you're missing the point, though.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are, because it doesn't matter whether you do it at 145 or 155. You aren't finding that many women at that weight that aren't already signed to another promotion, because you've got the Invictas, and you've got the Bellators, and you've got all the other independent promotions around the world that have locked in whatever women they have that are that size. So UFC is not going to be able to get 15 women unless they raid Bellator, and that would be contract tampering, and they would get sued.
But why are they catering to Cyborg?
Because Cyborg is a star.
Was this a star-worthy performance?
I would say so. It got me to order the pay-per-view.
That's true. You didn't order it for Barboza and Nurmagomedov.
In hindsight, maybe I did, because holy shit.
Nurmagomedov, he's been injured off and on, and it almost crossed the line into Jekyll and Hyde. But when he's on, is he on?
That first round is one of the most brutal ground and pound beatings I have witnessed. And you and I have been watching this sport a long time.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to say all-time greatest performance ever for a single round, but that was about as lopsided of a round as you could possibly get, because once Khabib got him to the ground and started hitting him in the face over and over again, I was looking at Edson Barboza like, how are you not out cold? How are you not, tapping out on the mat right now? Because you are just getting blasted in the face, unchecked, repeatedly. It was grim. It was like, if I was his corner, I would have thrown in the towel after that first round.
He's tough. He's always proven to be tough.
Edson Barboza might just be too tough for his own good, because the second round was almost as bad as the first, and the third round was only slightly less than the second. So when the scores came back 30-25, 30-25, 30-24, I was like, yeah, that's exactly right. That was a one-sided ass beating.
Can you imagine if after the first round the corner told him, don't worry, you still got 2 rounds. I still got 2 rounds of this?
You know what? I think Edson Barboza made a bad judgment call here. I really think he should have quit after the first round. There was no reason for him to continue to take a beating like that, because, okay, we know Edson Barboza is a strong guy. We know Edson Barboza has great leg kicks. But none of those things matter, because Khabib's wrestling is on another level. And it's not just because this guy wrestles bears. It's because this guy he's got that George St. Pierre thing where it doesn't even matter if he was ever a wrestler, growing up, because he's going to hone and craft that skill to the elitist possible level as a mixed martial artist, to the point that if he even gets his hands on your legs at any point, you're just going down, and there's no choice about it.
Now, Stevie, you're not, using a term. You actually mean he wrestles bears.
Yeah, I thought we'd had this discussion before.
Oh, I know, but every time you say it, I have to clarify for the audience. He's not making a euphemism. He actually wrestles bears.
Yeah, we are not joking about this. There are videos. It exists. There's proof. Speaking of wrestling bears, I like the post-fight promo where he explained that he would wrestle anybody in the world. He would wrestle any person, man or bear. He would gladly wrestle with Tony Ferguson. He wants to wrestle Conor McGregor, but Conor have too much money. When Conor spend all his money, he'll be back. I laughed and I applauded. I was like, yes, Habib, thank you. Somebody needed to say that. I'm glad it was you.
But you know how long it's going to take him to spend that much money?
Well, as Dave Meltzer said, the way Conor blows money, he could spend $100 million in a couple of years.
Stevie, do you have any magic beans you can sell him?
I could sell him a bridge in Brooklyn. I'd take some of that money from him.
It's a good one. Dan Hooker and Mark DeCasey.
One time my stream on UFC Fight Pass for this pay-per-view broke was right before Dan Hooker got the guillotine choke on Mark DeCasey. So I had to see the finish of the fight during the post-fight interview with Joe Rogan. I finally got to see the finish as a replay. So I'm a little miffed about that. But since UFC Fight Pass gave me 20% off for ordering the pay-per-view on their service, I'll call it a wash. Like, okay, I didn't get to see the finish live. I still saw it. I still got like $12 off the pay-per-view, so good enough. And I got the entertainment of Mark Jacquessy's entrance song. As far as I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, he is the first fighter in UFC history to come out to Big Shaq's "Man's Not Hot."
He could be. I'm not.
You don't know the song, do you?
I might know it in passing, but I don't think any other fighters come out to it.
I can say this to you, and if I say it, you'll know it, and if you don't, you won't. 2 plus 2 is 4, minus 1, that's 3 quick maths. Every day man's on the block. Smoke trees.
No, I'm sorry.
You gotta Google "Man's Not Hot" when we're off the air and watch the video. It is great.
Speaking of theme music, I do want to tell you this funny story. Right now we're in the midst of the World Junior Hockey Championships.
Mm-hmm.
And each team picks the song, so when they score a goal, this particular song will play.
Right.
There's a song they use. No one on the team is taking credit for it, but it's a DJ remix of a song that Bailey used to have played in NXT, where the crowd would chant it, "Would You Be My Girl?"
Mm-hmm.
It's a bad 90s remix of it, and no one's claiming responsibility, but they put up 8 on Switzerland, so that crowd had to hear that song 8 times today.
So you're talking about the song that goes, "I wanna know, will you be my girl?"
Yeah, that song.
Nice. They still play that song at football games.
Even the announcers are getting sick of it. It's like, it was cute the first couple of times, but we still have 2 more periods of hockey today, and we're already...
It would have been funnier if one of them had actually picked "Men's Not Hot," especially for a hockey game. I said, "Take off your jacket." I said, "Baby, man's not hot."
Alright, let's talk about Cynthia Calvillo and Carla Esparza.
Yeah, and another prediction that I got correct on this pay-per-view, because I just looked at the fact that Calvillo was such a heavy betting favorite, and I'm like, you know what? She's undefeated, but she's never faced anybody the caliber of the former strawweight champion. And people forget that about Carla Esparza. They forget that she won the Ultimate Fighter and was crowned the first ever strawweight champion. And just because she lost to a couple of good people recently doesn't mean she's a scrub. So Carla Esparza went out there and outworked Calvillo. And Calvillo was pitching a bitch after the scores were read. She went over to the broadcasters and the sports announcers and the people doing live play-by-play and started yelling, "I won that fight! I won that fight!" No, you didn't. Carla Esparza was outworking you in the second and the third round. She was out wrestling you. She was out striking you. She was doing everything you weren't. So if you're upset at the scores, you got the wrong idea here, because it was you who needed to do something, not the people scoring the fight. they did the right thing, you didn't.
See, after this fight was over, I had a flashback to the old video game days where in the arcade, when you lost like a Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, whatever game it was, and it said rematch with a question mark and tempted you to put more coins into the machine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I want to see a rematch here.
No, I think it was definitive. I feel like Carla got the better of her.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you can be upset about losing, but I don't think it's one of those fights where it warrants a rematch.
No, it wasn't close. It wasn't controversial.
No. Can we get a rematch of Condit and Mag? No, we're not going to do that either.
No, we're definitely not, because Neil Magny, much like the fight we were just talking about, completely outworked his opponent. And there wasn't even one round you could give to Carlos Condit here, but somehow one judge actually did.
I mean, it was a great performance by Magny, and I'm curious because his next opponent, if he gets a big name and he wins that fight, it's back-to-back quality name opponents that could put him up in a title opportunity or at least in the conversation.
Now, somewhere along the line, I got the impression this was Magny's last fight on his UFC contract. Unless he has that win and you get renewed automatically clause, which some fighters have. You can't leave on a win. They can, like, re-up you for one more fight.
Yeah, that's the, what's his name? He was Dana White's favorite, quote-unquote, favorite fighter because I'm going to fire you if you lose. And you
want you're talking about Nick Lentz.
Nick Lentz. The Nick Lentz clause, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The guy just kept winning.
Which made it great. Every time that Dana wanted to cut him, he'd win again. That was a fun little storyline that we had.
He's still with the promotion, so. Oh, man. Carlos Condit, what can you say? He was off for a while and maybe should have stayed there?
Yeah, ring rust was showing here.
Though, I mean, if he does get cut within next 12 months, I'm sure Bellator would sign him in a heartbeat.
You know what? Any promotion would. You always default to Bellator, which I understand because it's like the number one competitor to UFC in this country. But you're telling me One Fighting wouldn't sign Carlos Condit? Of course they would. You're telling me Legacy wouldn't sign Carlos Condit? Of course they would.
I'm more saying it because some of his opponents in the past are now in Bellator and they could always book the rematch.
Right, I get that.
You could have him against Rory, which I'd pay to see that in Bellator.
I mean, I totally understand what you're going for because they're doing Roy Nelson and Matt Mitrione. Obviously, they don't have a problem with doing UFC rematches in Bellator. But I'm saying Carlos Condit has enough cachet to his name and a big enough fan base. He's got a huge cult following that anybody would sign Condit. Anybody.
Mm. Well, let's talk about the prelims that happened on this show, and we had Mikhail against Khalil Roundtree. I'm not even going to try.
I believe it's Alexei.
Yes, we'll go with that.
I thought you were going to say Gesundheit.
No, did that last week.
Well, you know what? I was full of praise for Khalil Roundtree going into this fight, but I forgot something.
Mm.
I forgot that Khalil has a lot of muscle on a frame that probably isn't meant to hold it, which means that the fights he wins are usually fights where he comes out fast and creams people, but you put him in a long fight, he gets tired because his muscles are just sucking up all the blood and all the oxygen in his body. He has a complete faltering after the first 2 minutes, and in this fight, there were a couple of moments where it looked like he was starting to catch a second wind, and then Alexei would immediately take over again.
When I have to explain this, more muscles, more oxygen, I always use the same example, and I always default to wrestling because it makes the most sense. You never saw Scott Steiner do an Iron Man match.
No, that is exactly the perfect example. In fact, Scott Steiner got so muscular he was damn near immobile.
Yes, exactly. The next fight, Rick Glenn and Miles' Fury Jury, another decision. This was a decision-heavy card on December 30th.
But you know what? I know the crowd was getting restless by the main card of the pay-per-view, and I know a lot of people on Twitter were bitching and complaining, but I didn't totally mind it. There are some cards where it's one decision after another, and you just get completely bored out of your gourd and you're praying for a finish. But with the performance that Khabib turned in, and the performance that Chris Cyborg turned in, and the performance that Carla Esparza turned in, and Dan Hooker getting a finish, I was like, you know what? That's at least 4 quality fights that I paid to see, and I don't feel disappointed in any of them. And Magny and Condit wasn't super exciting, but it was an impressive performance by Magny to beat a guy as highly ranked as Condit. But back to Jury and Glenn. I'm just a little bummed that Rick Glenn made it. I mean, he was, how do I put this? He did not live up to the potential I believe he has. I considered him to be borderline to a top 15 guy coming into this fight. At one point, I actually had him ranked number 15 when somebody fell out of the rankings. I moved him up to take that spot, but he didn't prove it here. He got outworked by Miles Jury throughout this fight.
It was the right game plan. Simple to put, it was the right game plan for fighting. Like Jury's fight plan, basically he worked it to a T. I credit his coaching staff absolutely for this victory.
He's in there with Miles Jury, who's got just as many submissions and is a black belt under Kasike Elias and Don Richards. And he's probably thinking, I don't want to go hold for hold with this guy. But in the process of not wanting to go hold for hold, he let himself get dominated in every other position.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. We should move on to, I hate saying these words, majority draw.
Yeah, this was kind of an ugly fight. And I mean figuratively and literally because, okay, Akhmedov is another one of these guys who is almost exactly like I was saying with Khalil Roundtree, where he comes out really fast. First few minutes of the fight, he's really good. After that, he starts getting into this problem where in longer fights, he gets tired. Things start going against him. Because you look at the fights that he lost to Elias Dos Santos and Sergio Moraes. Those were both third-round TKOs when he was getting tired. So this guy either goes out there and does really good, really fast, and stacks up a lead and people can't catch up to him, or he goes out there, gets tired, and then he gets caught late. And it's not like Marvin Vettori wasn't trying to catch him, because he landed some really stiff shots, but Akhmedov had built up a little bit of a lead, and then lost a lopsided round late, so that just evened it all out to a draw.
So, when you see the majority draw on this one scorecard, are you thinking, oh crap, like it's a lot closer than I don't know, like, sometimes when I see majority draw, it's a BS result.
No,
but
it was actually completely the right score here, because Akhmedov started out good and faltered, and Vettori came roaring back at the end.
What about Louis Smolka and Matthews Nicolau?
Okay, very impressive performance by Nicolau here. It was the only other fight that I really would consider a blowout, like the Khabib-Edson fight. Nicolau was just working his ass off in this fight with Smolka, and honestly, I wasn't, super into Nicolau before this fight, but after this fight, I was like, you know what? I didn't give this guy enough credit. I should have not looked at the fact that he went to a split decision with John Moraga as a bad thing. I should have looked at it like, John Moraga is a really good guy, and he won a split decision, so obviously, he's pretty damn good if he could go to a split decision with Moraga, because in this fight, he looked way better than I remember him being on the Ultimate Fighter finale. I looked at him like, damn, you just smoked Louis Smolka, and that's not a bad fighter either. I don't know if I would say he's better or worse than John Moraga, considering he's lost 4 fights in a row now, but before this fight, I wouldn't have said Louis Smolka was a bad fighter, but he just got outclassed here.
He did. It's one named fighter to another named fighter. The first fight was on the prelims on Fight Pass. Mark De La Rosa got beat by Tim Elliott.
And this was very emotional. They asked Tim Elliott what he wanted to say afterwards, and he was like, "God bless you, Robert Follows. I miss you." And I'm not quoting him exactly right, but it was like that few number of words. That's all he could say.
Do you know the backstory behind that as well?
Yeah, it's his coach that committed suicide.
Oh, yes, okay.
I thought we covered that story a few weeks ago.
We did, but I want to know if there's any more context to that since last week, because...
No, it was just that him and Elliott were really close, and so Elliott had very few words to say after this fight, which, given the circumstances, is understandable. The fact that he even still took this fight after that, you know, that's a feather in his cap, because he didn't have to do that, but he was supposed to get a fight before this one that fell through, so, like I said to you before, I think this was a make-good for him, that his last opponent missed weight and they didn't have the fight, so they gave him this fight here, and he went out there and just basically ran through De La Rosa and choked him out.
Now we should move on to Ryzen Fighting Federation.
We should, but first, let's give the performance bonuses.
Oh, I didn't write that down.
Yeah, I got them right here. Chris Cyborg and Holly Holm got Fight of the Night. Habib got a Performance of the Night bonus, and so did Tim Elliott.
Oh, that's good. So Ryzen Fighting Federation, there were a couple different news stories that came out of this. We'll start with the small one, and we'll move our way up to the bigger ones.
Yeah, the bigger one is really big.
Ian McCall lost via TKO. He basically got cut open from the ring ropes.
That's unfortunate.
When you have scar tissue and your face glides against one of the ropes and kind of slides a little bit, it could reopen. And that was the opening his opponent Manel Cape needed, and the doctor had to stop the fight.
Which really sucks for him because, A, you know, we like him here on this show.
We do.
And B, he was one of the more colorful characters building up his fight on this Rising card. He actually got some attention for getting into a little bit of a push and shove with his opponent at the weigh-in, so he had piqued interest in this fight, and unfortunately it didn't go his way.
It's weird. He's had such a string of bad luck that it's...
I know. If it wasn't for bad breaks, he wouldn't have none. We got to get him on the show and get an update from him about that, because he's definitely not had some good times of late, and it's kind of sad to see.
Anthony Burchak, another named fighter from UFC past, lost a split decision to Jae Hun Moon, and I do want to mention a former UFC title contender, Koji Horiguchi. Man, is he at the top of his game right now.
Well, he's getting to fight on home turf in Ryzen, so I'm sure that helps.
Yeah, he beat Gabriel Oliveira in the first round via TKO, and this is on the second round, but man, it's just...
Are you really shocked, though? Consider where he was ranked in UFC before he got cut.
No, I'm not surprised. I mean, he went on to the finals and beat Shintaro Ishiwatari, knocked him out in the second round, and I saw this knockout on the replay, and he's getting better, and he was really good in UFC, but, you know, he took his talents elsewhere, and it's scary to think that, you know, if he ever comes back to UFC, I would hope that the door is still open. Not like last week when we talked about someone burning a bridge so bad, it's like you gotta call the fire department.
Right. Well, I think if Kyoji's gonna come back, DJ's either gotta retire or move up.
Yeah. Krokop won his fight against Tsuyoshi Kosaka.
Okay, question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How juiced did Krokop look?
Not as bad as other appearances, but not like the suspicion wouldn't still be there in my head.
So not totally natural.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
Takanori Gomi lost via submission at 2:36 of the first round to Yusuke Yashi.
Please, Gomi, just retire.
No, he won't.
He's tarnishing his legend at this point.
Well, we go from someone who's had a legend to a fighter who has a legend for another reason altogether.
Ooh, are you getting to the big story here?
Gabby Garcia.
Yeah, I knew it.
This fight was supposed to happen last year, but because of an injury, it got scrapped. Which, injuries happen. We all know that. Here's the problem. They tried booking it again this year. The opponent was over 50 years old, former judo champion. And Gabby Garcia missed weight by 20 plus pounds to the point where she had to go into the ring before one of the fights. And she actually went on her she went on her knees and basically apologized to the crowd.
She tried to cry and failed.
Yes. And it was, one of the lines that was really interesting, and that was, she said, they wouldn't let me come down the ramp. I had to come into the arena through the back entrance. Like, basically, I mean, it sounds to me like, the promotion really was embarrassed that this fight had to be canceled. I think they really wanted to have this fight happen, and for her to miss weight so badly.
Okay, you're actually kind of glossing over something important, though.
Oh, I was probably getting there, but go ahead.
Yeah, that's the fact that Gabby already outweighed this woman by a good 40 or 50 pounds, and she was fighting a 50-plus-year-old woman, and then she missed weight by another 27 pounds on top of that. There's no way this fight should have happened before she missed weight, let alone after.
When you're trying to explain this fight to someone,
you have to say it's Japan, because that's the only way you can explain it. It's Japan.
That's the first question was, what commission would regulate it? I go, it's Japan, no regulations, enough said. I mean, there's rules, but not so much rules in the span of weight class. Like, the fights like this can happen in Japan.
Okay.
Fights like this won't happen in Texas.
And here's another thing that you're either unintentionally or intentionally glossing over. Remember this argument that we had just a little bit ago on the show about what do you do with Chris Cyborg?
Yeah.
The problem for Chris Cyborg is that there's talent, but they're signed to other promotions. The problem with Gabby Garcia is there is no other talent. This woman is so freaking enormously huge, you cannot find another person in mixed martial arts in her weight class. In 7 billion people, there is not another Gabby Garcia. Not one.
And she came to prominence because she was a coach on one of the Ultimate Fighters Brazil, I believe.
Right. She was one of the assistant head coaches who was teaching the guys on the show jiu-jitsu, and she looked bigger than most of the guys.
It's like when Brian Stan went to interview the lighter weight classes, and you're like, no. You tower over, like Frank Mir, no, you tower over these people.
Mm-hmm.
But, we do have other fighters we have to talk about. One, unfortunately, has been suspended for a year in Bellator.
James the Colossus Thompson lost twice at Bellator 191. He lost Phil DeFries in 93 seconds by guillotine choke, and he lost his fight with the Athletic Commission because he got popped for steroids.
And, he's not exactly young. I mean, he's been around the fight game for a little while now, so a year suspension.
His current record is 20-17, so he's had almost 40 fights.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now he's gonna have to think about, maybe he can rest for a couple of months and maybe get back in some shape and go back at it, and then when that suspension ends, he has to...
Being in shape isn't exactly the problem. He's called the Colossus for a reason.
Yeah, but we go to the Scott Steiner argument where, if you're a Colossus, you're going to need a lot more oxygen.
Yeah, well, that has kind of been the curse of his career ever since Pride. Like, early in his career, he was great. Or, maybe not great, but he was at least above average. But time goes by, he gets older, his skill set doesn't improve greatly. So, he'll get on little runs here where he'll win like 2 or 3 fights in a row, and then he'll lose 3 or 4 fights in a row because he's basically still the same guy as he was back in the Pride days. He just never evolved. He just gets older, and he's still ripped, but he's not better.
So this is the problem that I have, and just follow me for a second here. When it comes to the Bellator promotion, I mean, Thompson fought. Where was this fight that he lost? He got beaten in the guillotine
at
choke.
the Metro Radio Arena in Newcastle, England. He was
Right.
fighting on home soil.
Exactly. Now, on one hand, Bellator, for a drug test, the commission issues the suspension for the year.
And
He was fined.
Before you go any further, let's add that the Mohegan Tribe was actually the athletic commission. They brought in an athletic commission for this card.
Because the last time Bellator had a show, they didn't have a commission, and some guy in a fur coat jumped the rail.
So this time they weren't having none of that nonsense.
Exactly. I think they learned their lesson. You have to have some form of a commission, whether it's a state or the Mohegan Tribe, doesn't matter. Let's have some commission people here on the property, on the premises, because we don't want Connor jumping in his fur coat every show we have overseas.
Well, and they want some kind of oversight, too. That's exactly why they had the Mohegan Tribe Department of Athletic Regulation there, where they're like, okay, we want scrutiny on this show. We want fighters tested. We want fighters' safety. We want everything to be the same standard it would be if these fighters were fighting in the U.S. under a U.S. commission. So we'll bring in the Mohegan Tribe. We'll have Mike Mazzulli oversee this. And, in fact, Mike Mazzulli is the one who fined and suspended James Thompson.
Well, let's move on to a fight announcement here. We've got Ashley Yoder fighting Mackenzie Dern at UFC 222.
Okay.
Which, I'm an undefeated fighter. If they want to step up and UFC wants to book him for another fight, I'm just curious because Mackenzie Dern, I don't know. It's a good fight on paper. I'm waiting to see an execution,
Mm-hmm. You just reminded me of something, though, that I wanted to mention from UFC 219.
Okay.
Dan Hooker, in his post-fight interview, was trying to campaign to get on the show in Perth like 6 weeks from now. And he said, who wouldn't want to see me on that show? And you could have heard crickets.
Yeah.
That crowd was not having it. They did not care about Dan Hooker one bit.
It was the old who's better than Canyon line.
Well, at least Canyon could get a pop when he said that.
True. Another fight announcement, UFC 221 in Perth, Li Jinglang against Jake Matthews.
Now that fight I'm looking forward to.
That one, it's interesting. That Perth show, it's very, very interesting indeed. Are you a Cowboys fan by chance? Dallas Cowboys?
I kind of like them in the 90s a little bit. I guess I'd say I respect them, but they're nowhere close to my favorite team.
Former Dallas Cowboy Greg Hardy is gonna fight at LFA 33.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. I don't like this, former NFL player thinking he can be an amazing, the guys are athletes.
We've seen Herschel Walker do it, so why not?
Greg Hardy's no Herschel Walker.
Hey,
Herschel Walker's an Olympic athlete.
Matt Mitrione's a former football player.
Oh, I wouldn't. Well,
Okay, there are some guys who can do it.
okay. You got me with the Mitrione, but this guy's no Herschel Walker. But Mitrione, last time, remember, you still caught me off guard when you said the Mitrione's the favorite.
Well, that's just based on his knockout power. You gotta admit, Matt Mitrione has heavy hands, and if they connect, people go to sleep.
Definitely true. Mitrione, it's been a few,
He's your Jekyll and Hyde fighter that you were talking about
Yeah.
earlier, where it's like, when he's good, he's great. And when he shits the bed, he does it in spectacular fashion.
and this is the first, I don't think you've ever had this to say on this podcast before, but Misha Tate,
Is having a little tater tot.
I heard a little cupcake.
Well, either way, there's a little one on the way.
That's pretty awesome. Congratulations.
Absolutely.
I'd rather have more. I like having some positive news on the show on occasion. So
Oh, I'm happy for her. She deserves that.
absolutely. Actually, that's all the news I really have. I ended the notes on my sheet here with some positivity.
Well, since
Stevie,
you did mention the purse show, I just want to reiterate something about it for those who haven't been keeping track. That is actually for the middleweight title because George St. Pierre vacated his title, so the interim champion became the new champion. Robert Whittaker defends his middleweight title, undisputed middleweight title, against former champion Luke Rockhold. So that main event in Perth is one hell of a fight.
and I'm sure you'll probably get a discount if you order on Fight Pass, if you have Fight Pass.
I hope so. If they give me one, I'll use it. But before we even get to that point, we've got an exciting UFC 220 card that's going to be coming up very, very soon here with a main event of Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou and a co-main event of Daniel Cormier and, if he's out of jail, Volkan Ozdemir.
We're not kidding. He is going to be in court that week.
Yeah, it's going to be tight, but hopefully they can pull that off.
But we'll preview that fight card coming up soon.
And before we even preview that, we'll have a fight night with Stevens and Duho Choi.
Absolutely. What's on tap for Thursday Night AMP?
It's going to be the review of Wrestle Kingdom 12.
And hopefully we'll announce the details on that show for the Angry Marks Royal Rumble pool this year. Now that we are in 2018, it's apt time we should get those details to pen to paper, so to speak, and hopefully by either this week or next week we'll have details on the show.
Let's get ready to rumble.
Wrong buffer.
No, that wasn't even Bruce Buffer.
Oh, okay.
That wasn't Bruce Buffer or Michael Buffer. That was, what's the name of that band? Volbeat. Feel
Don't know
the
that one.
strength of a warrior. Fight, 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 fight.
I'm gonna get some MP3 emails later on.
Yeah, you gotta hear this Volbeat song. It's great.
Alright, well for Stevie J, I'm Peter H, a hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening, and as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
See ya.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.